At HDR,
yes,
we've always
wonderful.
helped communities
Thank you.
adapt to a changing world. From bringing power to the plains more than 100 years ago, to reimagining how we connect, how we solve
No problem.
challenges, and how we create a brighter future. Leading the transportation transformation and modernizing mobility. With the unique perspective of many, we're motivated to shape our world for the better through inclusion, collaboration, and innovation. At HTR, we do things right to make great things possible.
So it is not moving. I could try. Oh,
Each
now it's
morning,
moving.
we wake up eager to build a brighter future for the places where we live and work.
That appeared
That's
to,
why
when I speak, yeah.
we are here.
Yeah.
We are here to benefit places
Yes.
that for us are more than just mere dots on a map.
Okay.
They're the very communities that we ourselves call home. We're not just building your community, we're deeply investing in our communities. HNTB has been here for more than a century and will continue leaving permanent impacts across the country. We are here doing much more than solving transportation challenges. We are here to bring people together and expand opportunity by engaging in the things that matter the most. We are here to make all lives better. We are here for everyone. And we're living our daily commitment by working with you to invest in a collective bright future, cultivating the next brilliant generation by introducing the possibilities of engineering to kids who otherwise might not have had the opportunity. Not driving to work because we're proud to ride the local public transit system we helped create. And reading to kids to help them improve the skills they'll need to be successful. Over the generations, we have become the industry leader at bringing people together through innovation, collaboration, and inclusion to improve the quality of life for our friends, for our neighbors, and our families. We are here to create the community that's important to you, to all of us. We have been a part of your community in the past. We are here now, and we will continue to be here with you as we work together to build our community, our home.
Welcome to Transpo Industries. Transpo manufactures and supplies products for airports, bridges, roadways, and tunnels. Founded in 1968, Transpo's safety products have saved thousands of lives. Our decades of experience producing high-strength polymer concrete materials and precast products has made Transpo a recognized leader in the transportation industry. Agencies all over the country are increasingly using our MMA pavement marking material as an integral part of complete streets implementation. Our team of experts and engineering tools bring clients a level of technical support that is unparalleled in the industry, and we proudly maintain ISO quality certification at all company facilities. Come explore our innovative product lines and find out how Transpo Industries can help you complete your next successful project.
Being part of a company with a purpose and mission is important to me because it makes me feel at the end of the day like we're really contributing to improving the environment, making people's lives easier.
The work that we do is improving people's lives. It's creating communities where people feel more connected.
It's about giving back. You have to really care and understand.
Everybody knows us. They've all worked with us. And most of them have an incredible amount of respect for the work that we do, the quality of our work.
With the purpose of utilizing the skills and expertise we have in the company, we all bring it together to make a difference, to really create great places.
It's exciting to work for a company that has a purpose. The company really focuses on successfully completing high-profile, complex projects, and at the same time it balances its focus on people and the people that work for it.
You can talk.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of the Met Section and the Local Arrangements Committee, welcome. Thank you for participating in the 2021 ITE Northeastern District meeting. My name is Amir Razavi. I'm the Director of Transportation Systems for VHB, and along with Steve Eisenberg, I'm the co-chair for this conference. It's been a long road for us to get to this point today. We are very happy to bring this to you virtually. You may remember that we were planning to hold this in person back in 2020, May 2020 on Long Island, which clearly didn't pan out the way we all would have expected and would have liked it to be. And then after a lot of planning, we still were trying to have an in-person conference even in May 2021, but that still didn't pan out either. But here we are, and we're really happy to be able to bring this to you virtually. All the sessions will be recorded so you can view them at your leisure as well. We have a full program as part of this conference. Today there'll be 2 sessions followed by a social event. The social event will be held via a different platform called GatherTown. You should have received a separate link for that. That promises to be a lot of fun. There'll be prizes, trivia, great opportunities to network with some old friends and also make new acquaintances. Tomorrow we will have a full day of sessions. There'll be 4 sessions. There'll also be a lunchtime event featuring ITE International President Alyssa Rodriguez, followed by the Northeastern District Award Ceremony. And then on Friday we will have our last event on Friday morning. Interspersed within the schedule are also messages from our sponsors. I want to point out that this meeting is free of cost to all members and is being brought at a very nominal fee to non-members thanks to our wonderful sponsors. Interspersed, you'll see messages from the sponsors and also something which is unique that we're doing called hot seat interviews. And you'll see some industry leaders showing their vulnerability when asked to try hot sauces. I should point out that everyone who participated was fully vaccinated at the time of those interviews. So let's get started with our first session. I truly hope you enjoy the conference. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to my co-chair, Steve Eisenberg. Take it away, Steve. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Steve Eisenberg. I'm an associate at L.K. McLean Associates out in Brookhaven. We welcome you all. Before we get started with the first session, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. After the presentations, there'll be a Q&A session. If any of you have questions during the presentations, please feel free to chat in the box. Now, you will have to log into your own YouTube account in order to access the typing feature, if you so wish to. At the end of the session, there'll be a Google form that will be displayed in the chat box where you'll be able to sign in so you can receive your PDH credits as well. After registering for your PDHs, you are going to have to sign in through ITE's portal, where you can create an account if you don't already have one, and you can go through that portal that way in order to submit to get your PDHs. With that said, let's get into our first session. This session is on complete and green streets for all. Now, this was previously recorded and moderated by Mike Dan Miller, who's a principal engineer at NV5, and we have 4 great speakers for you as well. The first is Elise Bremer-Ney, who is the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for New Jersey DOT. Suzanne Ishii, who is the director for the Hub for Creative Placemaking at NJIT. We have Tim Brill, who's the Central Jersey project manager for New Jersey Conservation Foundation. And we also have Leanne Von Hagen, who is the managing director for Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University. So with that, let's get to our first presentation.
And policies to make inspirational projects happen. I'm Mike Dannemiller. I'm principal engineer over at NV5, and I'll be moderating this session with several of my friends who I've been working with for years, and we're going to showcase a couple of the recent publications that Jersey DOT has done in collaboration with Together North Jersey on the model policy for complete and green streets for all, and planning for greenways, a guidebook for New Jersey communities. The experts who have helped put these together are our panel. I will introduce each of them in turn, but the quick version is we've got Elise Bremer-Ney from NJDOT. We've got Suzanne Ishii from NJIT's Creative Hub for Creative Placemaking. Tim Brill from Central Jersey, the Central Jersey Project Manager for New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and Leanne Von Hagen from the Senior Researcher and Adjunct Professor or Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers. So with that, we're going to hear first from Elise. So first we're going to hear from Elise Bremer-Ney. Elise is the bike ped coordinator and a licensed professional planner with NJ Department of Transportation's Office of Safety, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Programs. Elise approaches her responsibilities with understanding that walking and biking are about more than transportation. They touch on the most important elements of our lives, including health, safety, and quality of life. Elise has managed, developed, or had a hand in most of the significant plans that make New Jersey a leader in bicycle and pedestrian mobility, some of which we're going to hear about today. I hand this off to Elise.
Thanks, Mike. My work at the Department of Transportation is guided by the principle that walking and bicycling are healthy and economical modes of transportation that should be safe, secure, and convenient for all travelers. Although progress has been made and many communities in New Jersey recognize the value of walking and bicycling, there remains a need for resources, guides, technical assistance to help make walking and bicycling safer, easier, and more appealing across the state. At the DOT, we have a number of plans and guides that we have produced over the years as resources for best practice in policy, design, and implementation. For example, our Complete Streets Design Guide presents tools and methodologies for designing complete streets in a variety of settings, with attention to the specific needs of each community. It's a guide to integrating complete streets into every type of street in New Jersey. Another good example is our School Zone Design Guide and Schools Bike Parking Guide, which focus on engineering measures to make the environment to, from, and around schools a place where children and their parents feel safe and want to walk and bicycle. Our two newest guides, the Complete and Green Streets Model Policy and Guide, and Planning for Greenway's Guidebook, are not only fantastic resources that my co-presenters will go into in more detail shortly, but they represent what can happen when strong partnerships are forged with organizations and leaders who have a shared interest in health, wellness, equity, economic stability, and environmental sustainability. Each of these guides is a compilation of current best practice. Our vision is for New Jersey to be a place where people of all ages and abilities can routinely and conveniently bicycle and walk with confidence, safety, and security. We hope you will use these guides to find your inspiration. Another service my office provides is our local bicycle and pedestrian planning assistance program. It pairs municipalities with one of our on-call consultants who will assist your community with project planning. To date, our office has funded plans in over 100 towns through this program. We aid the development of a variety of plans to improve conditions for walking and bicycling, including bicycle and pedestrian circulation studies, pedestrian safety assessments, trail feasibility studies, bikeway plans, crosswalk improvement plans, and more. If you are interested in learning about applying to this planning assistance program, please email us at bikeped@dot.nj.gov. I'm often asked for examples of the type and size of our local planning assistance reports, so here are a few. One of the types of plans our on-call consultants develop is bicycle and pedestrian circulation plans. These plans identify safety concerns, missing links, connectivity, and strategies and priorities for implementation. Plans include a public engagement process developed in consultation with the municipality. Metuchen is implementing facilities based on this NJDOT funded plan. Another type of planning offered is regional trail and greenway studies, like the one for the September 11th National Memorial Trail. This trail will eventually link the planned and existing memorial sites at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the Flight 93 National Memorial, and the New Jersey connection to the East Coast Greenway, which is the nation's longest connected biking and walking route. Let's talk a bit about grant funding and getting these projects built. NJDOT has grant funding for infrastructure projects divided into state-funded programs and federally funded programs. One of the reasons we provide our local planning assistance program is to develop plans for infrastructure projects that can be implemented through one of these local aid grant programs. For state-funded programs, the Transportation Trust Fund of New Jersey provides $400 million in state aid to municipalities and counties for local transportation improvements. Each fiscal year, NJDOT issues a solicitation announcement inviting municipalities to apply for funding. Applications receive an extra point if they have an adopted complete streets policy. Typically, state-based funding is a bit easier to spend than federal funds. Although some of the state aid is specific to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, keep in mind that NJDOT also encourages 10% of all municipal aid funds to address the safety of people walking and bicycling. For federal funding programs, the National Highway Trust Fund receives money from a federal fuel tax. Every state in the nation receives an apportionment from this fund. Two popular grant programs are Safe Routes to School and transportation alternatives. As with grant programs that are funded through the state, the federal programs also receive an extra point if they have an adopted complete streets policy. Currently, there is an open solicitation for transportation alternatives, or TA set-aside grants. Eligible projects must fall into one of the following 7 categories: design and construction of on-road and off-road trail facilities for pedestrians, cyclists, and other non-motorized travelers, conversion and use of abandoned railroad corridors for trails for pedestrians and cyclists, the construction of scenic turnouts, overlooks, and viewing areas, preservation and rehabilitation of historic transportation facilities, both land and water, including building structures and canals, community improvement activities, specifically streetscaping and corridor landscaping, environmental mitigation to address stormwater management, control, and water pollution prevention or abatement related to highway construction or due to highway runoff. And finally, the reduction of vehicle-caused wildlife mortality or restoration and maintenance of connectivity among terrestrial or aquatic habitats. The deadline for the TA set-aside applications is November 24th. It is anticipated that a grant solicitation for the Safe Routes to School program will be out later in 2020. For more information, you should visit the NJDOT Local Aid Resource Center online. That was a very quick summary, so please feel free to email me with any questions you might have.
Thank you, Elise. That was great. Our next presenter is Suzanne Ishii. Suzanne's the director of New Jersey Institute of Technology's NJIT Hub for Creative Placemaking. She's the co-chair of the Livable Task Force for Together North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, which generated the development of the Planning for Greenways guide that we're going to hear about now. So please take it away, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's my pleasure to be with all of you today and to introduce the Planning for Greenways guide. As Mike mentioned, this was a demonstration project of the Livable Task Force for Together North Jersey. And Together North Jersey is affiliated, as you probably know, with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority and the Voorhees Transportation Center. The Greenway guidebook brought together a steering committee in the planning phase, which included members of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, a representative from the Department of Transportation, from the Department of Environmental Protection, from County Planning Office, as well as a professional planner, from Leanne Von Hagen from the Voorhees Transportation Center, from whom you'll hear shortly, Tim Brill, you'll also hear from right after me, New Jersey Bike Walk Commission, and of course, the Livable Task Force at Together North Jersey. So the Greenway guidebook, the Planning for Greenways guidebook is divided into 3 sections, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about each of those sections. The first is an introduction to Greenway guide development, as well as what they are and why we do this, and the environmental and ecological impacts that our greenways can have, as well as an introduction to the network of a substantial number of greenway guides in New Jersey, and an ability to be a part of that network. So let's look at the definition of a greenway. a linear corridor with environmental, recreational, and transportation utility that includes a shared path for walking, bicycling, and non-motorized uses. The second section of the Greenway guidelines deals with why you're doing this, the beginning of the planning process, why you're doing this, and for whom are you doing it. The most important first step is to form a steering committee and an advisory committee. Begin from the very beginning to reach out to the community and have those early conversations so that you can begin to build the support. Then we are also going to give you some recipes for how to engage the community so that you feel that the community is totally a part of a community engaged design process. And finally, section 2 of the guidebook talks about funding, where you can find the money, or show me the money. Now, the most fundamental and important aspect of your planning process is making sure that you get a good cross-sector diverse team of community members. Your team should include professionals from different fields of practice so that you can get multiple perspectives and resources from these professionals. It should also include activists and advocates for your community. And perhaps you want to be deliberate with regards to bringing in voices that are not often heard from in the planning process. Once you have put together the ideas for this team, you will be well on your way to being successful with presenting to the community and engaging the community. I cannot stress the critical importance of providing a robust, diverse group of team members who are committed to helping you with this process. We recommend 10. 10 is a good number. Many more than that is you're going to run into difficulty with decision making. Too many less than that, you're not going to have enough perspectives at the table. Now, to help you along with your planning process, there are excellent national resources that are available to you. Here's a list of a few of them. They offer toolkits and outstanding case examples and other resources for you to call upon. In addition, you have resources within your municipality. Connecting with the municipality will help you determine what else is in the planning stages for the municipality, what kind of connectivity you can get with other initiatives in your municipality and in your county as well. And in addition, you have excellent state resources. Further, you have organizational resources within the state of New Jersey. I will point out in particular the Highlands and Pinelands zone because those areas are areas that have some of the most significant scenic beauty and outdoor recreational opportunities in the state. Recently, a new process has been put in place called a rural enterprise zone for the Highlands and Pinelands areas. Now, this includes specifically Bergen, Hunterdon, Morris, Passaic, Somerset, and Sussex and Warren counties, as well as to our south, Cumberland, Gloucester, and Salem counties. The purpose of this enterprise, the rural enterprise zone, is to provide some kind of tax incentive for these areas that have been severely impacted by their lack of ability to develop. And the promotion is for efforts towards agritourism and ecotourism. So I invite you to look a little bit further into the rural enterprise zone and the status of that at this point. The last section of the Greenway development process is details about how to get started, how to gain traction within your community. You need to prepare a concept plan. You need to have any necessary engineering studies or construction costs and budgeting and so forth, as well as your plan for activation. How are you going to launch this? Is it going to be an event in your community? How are you going to market it in advance to make sure that you're successful with your launch? In addition, your plan needs to have details about how the Greenway will be operated throughout the course of time and how it's going to be maintained, who's going to do this. And we also suggest that you may want to open up in phases. Start small and be informed by what happens initially, and then grow from there. The other piece of this that I would encourage you strongly to focus on is mapping. Mapping is probably the greatest tool that you can add to your Greenway planning process, because it provides access for tourists as well as community members and the business community. When you identify all of the assets within the Greenway, you can extend out to those assets that exist in the community, as well as connection points with other entities in the community. It also provides a tremendous opportunity to promote your Greenway and to share with tourists. The more overlays that you present in your map, the more opportunity you have to reach out and provide the different aspects of what the Greenway can do for people who have particular interests. So here's just this little short roadmap that was provided by the Middlesex Greenway, which is an outstanding case example of a successful Greenway in the state of New Jersey. And finally, it's time to launch your Greenway, open it up to visitors, begin to sustain your Greenway, and to move forward with the planning and further development and analysis of your the impact and success of your Greenway. So the only other word I want to share with you is a word of caution that this is not a short process. This is, you can't put a stopwatch on this. You need to think of it more like an almanac. And so it's forecasting and then experimenting, trying it out, and coming back and retooling it. And it's a long-term process with growing benefits throughout the entire development and maintenance and process. I invite you, if you have any questions, to visit me at Creative Placemaking at njit.edu. And if you would like to download a copy of the Planning for Greenways Guidebook, please visit togethernorthjersey.com and click under the Livable Task Force. You will find it on the homepage of the Livable Task Force. They're free for you to download. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. So next up, we've got Tim Brill. Tim Brill is the Central Jersey Project Manager for New Jersey Conservation Foundation. Tim's been helping preserve open space and farmland, as well as developing parks, trails, and greenways as the Central Jersey project manager since 2015. Tim served at the State Agriculture Development Committee as its planning manager, and also worked in local government for 19 years over at Cumberland County Department of Planning and Development and for the City of Bridgeton. Tim's a licensed professional planner and a graduate of Glassboro State College, now Rowan University. Tim's got a lot of insight about mapping and how to help get things done. So Tim, please take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Michael. New tool in the toolbox here, known as Conservation Blueprint, that we think can be very helpful in incorporating greenways into bicycle and pedestrian trail network. Not every trail will be in a greenway. Not every green space is compatible with trails, but we think the opportunities to coordinate conservation, recreation, and transportation uses in greenways is a real plus for a state like New Jersey. The New Jersey Conservation Foundation has established a goal of providing a park or a trail within a 10-minute walk of every New Jersey resident. The Garden State Greenways concept was developed as a dynamic online planning tool using all the latest geographic information system tools to help organize open space and farmland preservation initiatives. The initiative is 100% compatible with the concepts of complete streets, safe routes to school, and safe routes to transit, as well as accessible trail networks for all residents of the state of New Jersey. The Garden State Greenways concept revolves around hubs and connectors. Think of spokes in a wheel here. The Greenways framework provides a statewide vision with detailed maps and powerful GIS tools to help coordinate efforts of private groups as well as governmental agencies. Greenways allow us to treat land and water as a system of interlocking pieces in a puzzle, not isolated entities. I'm going to jump in and share with you a series of slides. This is what you would encounter on the internet webpage here. Rowan University has done a great job working with a steering committee and partners and updating the tool over time to address new opportunities to provide information and that layer cake approach to mapping that these GIS tools provide and offer. The best part of New Jersey Map or Garden State Greenways here is this tool is not the type of tool that requires a master's degree in geography. It's designed for the everyday user here. I hope you get a chance to explore and develop an affinity for this new tool. The viewer is free, and it's an interactive atlas for ecological resources, environmental education, and sustainable communities. As I say, Rowan University was instrumental in bringing the partners together to develop this tool for all New Jersey citizens, municipalities, advocacy groups. Anyone with internet access can take advantage of this service here. The maps focus on specific environmental, land use, and sustainability layers, but they can be combined and interacted with in a multitude of ways here. It's intended for use by sustainable Jersey green teams, municipal planning boards, environmental commissions, land trusts, watershed organizations, trail planners, and just general concerned citizens here. The idea is to make this data readily available, relatable, and easy to understand. One of the home pages here involves community green space. So this is a theme that brings together different data layers throughout the state. You can see the geography statewide and the ability to kind of see spatial relationships across political boundaries. If you want to zoom in to the New Brunswick area, for instance, here, the program allows you to select base map options from a variety of different sources, as well as providing boundary option layers, including state, municipal, and county boundaries. And it even provides access to individual parcels from a tax map level of access. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Here, this is another map showing priority lands that have been identified for community green space. Behind the screen, so to speak, here, there's an analysis process that looks at various criteria and factors to come up with high, medium, and lower priority resources that you may want to focus on in your selection processes. Other tools involve population density, green infrastructure augmentation, essentially where are the green spaces that are not preserved adjacent to existing open spaces and parklands. We can also look at distance to trails, distance to open spaces, distance to schools, recreation areas. Open space mapping continues to evolve over time as parcels are preserved through various programs at Green Acres and the State Ag Development Committee. We are also in the early stages of trying to gather all information on existing trails and trailheads. As we develop this network, this layer will change over time. Just to give you a little flavor of the ability to use this tool to zoom in on a specific parcel. This is Bucklew Park in New Brunswick here along the Raritan River. The program provides access to a parcel explorer tool that provides information on specific parcels. So if you click on a specific piece of real estate here, selected data will appear by block and lot, providing all kinds of information on ownership and other kind of characteristics, size, tax assessments, a host of data for your easy access here. I'll just leave you with a few examples of these Greenway concepts that New Jersey is blessed to already have as an inspiration of other kinds of greenways that we hope will develop in the years to come. First and foremost, the poster child of greenways is the D&R Canal in New Jersey. 70 miles, 70 miles in length from New Brunswick all the way to Frenchtown, an amazing greenway resource in the most densely populated state in the United States here. And the trails go through many rural areas, but they also cut right through the heart of cities like Trenton here, providing access to a lot of people and businesses in those types of communities. Mercer County has also been embarking on trail planning here. The Greater Mercer Transportation Management Association has done a great job of developing a trail plan and a pattern book. Mercer County has recently released a bicycle master plan that kind of coordinates efforts on county roads and facilities with this greater network. Nonprofit groups like the Lawrence Hopewell Trail have been instrumental in developing many of these greenways. In a portion, this happens to be in Lawrence and Hopewell Townships in Mercer County. And this loop is almost complete now. It's over 90% complete after 2 decades of effort putting the puzzle together here. One of the newer proposals to kind of hit the ground running here involves a Capital to the Coast trail, which will extend all the way from Trenton to Manasquan. And you can start to see the connections of green spaces along this route that will allow this trail to proceed through many Greenway corridors. Somerset County has done some great work in recent years, coordinating a network of trails through urban as well as rural areas. I recommend you take a peek at their work. Garden State also is fortunate to be in the middle of the East Coast Greenway, as mentioned earlier. We think this is a tremendous opportunity to bring people to and through our communities here. The beauty of the East Coast Greenway is that it's the urban equivalent of the Appalachian Trail. Instead of going around cities, the concept is the trail will go right through the heart of many of our developed areas. And I'll just leave you with a couple of slides here. We've been very involved, the Conservation Foundation, in the development of the Circuit Trail Network in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. And this is an amazing, nationally significant effort of more than 750 miles of connected Greenway trails that will allow pedestrians and bicyclists to make enjoyable commutes as well as recreational time on the trail here. I encourage everyone to take a few minutes to explore this new tool. If you Google NJ Map or Conservation Blueprint, you will find a link and take time to explore the possibilities of this new tool in your plans for greenways in your geography in New Jersey. I listed my email address as well as my cell phone number. I made the mistake of giving my cell phone number, and I welcome your calls and look forward to seeing new and exciting projects develop in the years to come. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Excellent. So next up, we've got Leanne Von Hagen. Leanne is a licensed professional planner and senior researcher and adjunct professor with the Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University. She manages the New Jersey Department of Transportation's Safe Routes to School Resource Center and the statewide school crossing guard training program. She's worked in the transportation field for over 25 years with a focus on developing sustainable and equitable transportation and land use solutions for communities. Leanne pulls a lot of these things together that we've been hearing about today, and I'm glad that she's able to join us and share her perspectives firsthand. Please take it away, Leanne.
Thanks, Mike. I think you added 5 years onto my experience. I'm not that old. So thanks for switching to my topic. As Mike said, I'm Leanne Von Hagen. I manage the Safe Routes Resource Center at Rutgers University. And we are funded by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. Thank you so much, Elise. And I'm going to talk to you about a newer resource called the Complete and Green Streets for All Guide and Model Policy. And just give you a little bit of background on how this project came together. In many ways, New Jersey is a success story for complete streets policies, as probably many of you know. The Department of Transportation adopted a statewide complete streets policy in 2009, and in the last 10 years, over 169 towns and 8 counties have passed their own complete streets policies, which should mean we are making dramatic progress towards making roads safer for people who walk and bike. Yes? However, our fatality numbers don't necessarily make that case. In the past few years, the percentage of fatalities for people walking and bicycling has been going up. So far this year, and that's 2020, of all motor vehicle fatalities, 35% are pedestrians or bicyclists. That's even with fewer cars on the road due to COVID-19. And I'm not saying there's a direct correlation between the two. I'm just saying we have a lot of work to do in this state. At the statewide level, every month, an informal group of people representing organizations interested in discussing pressing issues Partnerships and growing better, safer, more equitable streets in New Jersey meet to coordinate efforts with towns and counties in adopting complete streets policies. It's a once-a-month meeting where groups like Bike Ped Advocates, AARP, American Heart Association, New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and even the DOT and other state agencies meet to discuss complete streets and even water quality issues to see how we can make the conditions better for the state. And a few years ago, it became clear that towns were interested in adopting policies, but sometimes the quality of those policies were really all over the place. And I can attest to the quality of some of the complete streets policies adopted because I am the reviewer for the complete streets policies for Sustainable Jersey actions. And I was finding that I was having to reject a number of the policies submitted because they really weren't fully being complete streets policies. They were missing very important pieces of information to really define them as complete streets. And I'll just mention this, if you are looking to adopt a complete or complete in green streets policy, which I'll get into in a moment, I do offer a pre-policy review before you go to adoption. So make sure you get my name and email address and send me any sort of draft policy so I can do a Sustainable Jersey review prior to adoption. So here's what I found with some of the policy problems, and this wasn't just me, there were others as well who noticed this. So one thing is there's little to no transparency or accountability in some of the policies. There were often no provisions for providing exemptions to policies in writing and no public involvement. There were often a lot of caveats. Words like when feasible, if practical, if possible, they were all through the policies. And they were used like a monopolies get out of jail free card. There's already an exemption in complete streets policies that has language for when you want to be exempt from complete streets. However, these other caveats were throughout the whole policy as well. There were a lot of policies that had maximum cost requirements. In other words, the town will implement complete streets as long as it doesn't cost more than 5% of the total cost. And I'm sure many of you know construction budgets can easily go over by 5% with the change in cost of materials. It was also difficult for us to evaluate progress with no benchmarks or other ways to ensure that local and county governments were actually installing projects. And most of the resolutions that passed do not have an actual policy for implementation. Resolutions are nice, but most of them are not backed up with policies, which I'll explain more about shortly. And I think after years and years of so many towns passing resolutions, but not a lot of further progress, it left our group wondering, what happened to implementation? We also know that transportation decision-making includes many areas outside of traditional transportation topics, including public health, stormwater management or green streets, economic impacts, and equity. Yet policies were not acknowledging those connections. We also acknowledge the need to encourage stronger policy adoption. The way I like to explain it is there are resolutions, which are an official statements of support using the typical whereas type statements. There's a policy, which is the process and actions designed to ensure that complete streets are routinely considered in all transportation decisions. Often this can include the use of checklists. However, the gold standard is adopting an ordinance, which is law that can be enforced and becomes part of a searchable record of municipal law. What resulted is a new guide that was at least 2 years in the making and propels New Jersey into the next decade of working to make our streets accessible for all modes of transportation for all ages and abilities. We created a guide that gives model language for resolutions, policy that better addresses implementation, and ways to adopt ordinances. On that note, I'm going to briefly walk you through some of the model policy highlights. Let's start with public health and safety. We work closely with our health partners like American Heart Association on health language. For example, our model health and safety language reads, whereas complete streets encourages an active lifestyle through increased physical activity, social connectivity, and a sense of community belonging, thereby lowering the risk of obesity, reducing chronic disease, improving mental health, and promoting wellness. And whereas traffic crashes are preventable and the only acceptable number of traffic deaths for my town is 0. Next up, let's talk about green streets. If you're not familiar with green infrastructure or design or green streets, it's a growing interest in our state. On the East Coast for the past 50 years, the amount of heavy rain events has increased by 71%. It's important to note that the green infrastructure won't capture hurricane events, but it can capture the 1 to 2 to 3 inch rain events, which make up 90% of the rainfall events that we see and that cause major damage and nuisance flooding from day to day. So here's our model language. Whereas complete streets that incorporate sustainable green streets design elements such as green stormwater infrastructure, traffic calming treatments, shade trees, and the use of recycled materials, protect and create a healthier, natural, and social environment, improve air and water quality, and reduce localized flooding. All right, let's talk about equity. Before I get into the model language, I want to tell you about one of our municipalities that highlights a typical situation. State Route 130 splits the city of Burlington into 2. Not only that, but the state road splits into one-way sections with a large median that houses commercial destinations like a Good Jersey Diner, McDonald's, and a Wawa. You can see a middle school and a high school are also located along the state road. These safety issues alone are cause for concern, but let's take a deeper look. When we look at the city of Burlington, we have a census tract to the south of Route 130. Just to the north of Route 130 is another census tract in the same city, but the circumstances are different. In the orange, there's a median household income of around $52,000 and a 7% unemployment rate, which is pre-COVID, and 11% of the people living in poverty. In the blue is a median household income of about $74,000, an 8% unemployment rate, and about 6% of people living in poverty. So this is the same city with different outcomes depending on where you live. I give this illustration not because it's unique, rare, or even the worst case of the line between having better health outcomes or not, but because it's common. However, when we see our complete streets projects in our towns, they are often not in the section of town which experiences the worst social and economic burdens. And that was, of course, prior to COVID-19, and we know this situation could get a lot worse and has been. To be honest, the language around this topic took us almost a year, but here's what we came up with. Some of this language is lifted directly from our governor's executive order on environmental justice communities, and we had representation from the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance on our working group. Whereas low and moderate income areas, whether in rural, urban, or suburban communities, are typically the least safe for pedestrians and bicyclists, especially for children walking and bicycling to school, due to long-standing infrastructure disparities and higher concentration of streets with faster moving and higher volume traffic. And whereas procedures that should be implemented that ensure fair treatment, equitable funding, and resource distribution, and meaningful involvement of all communities in all phases from selection, planning, and design to construction and long-term maintenance. Finally, we have guidance on putting this policy into action. For the policy section, we recommend and provide model language about establishing a complete streets advisory body as oversight to comply with the policy and provide ongoing feedback about implementation. The term priority communities refers to categories of underserved and adversely impacted populations. These are some of the categories to consider when defining priority communities: female head of household with children, persons with limited English proficiency, careless households, elderly populations and children, persons with disabilities, Hispanic populations, other ethnic minorities, and families in poverty with children. In the policy, we also recommend a municipality's work to ensure consistency with and include complete streets in the master plan or the comprehensive plan and elements. We also list many benchmarks for evaluating progress. Benchmarks can include mileage of new bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, including in priority communities, number of new street trees, number of green street practices like rain gardens, bioswales, and permeable pavement, the number, locations, and causes of collisions, injuries, and fatalities by each mode of transportation, and the percentage of children walking or bicycling to school. Finally, many of our towns adopt complete streets checklist based on our checklist used at the State Department of Transportation. We enhanced the current model checklist from DOT to include green streets, equity considerations, and created a new checklist for maintenance. This is a brief overview, but there's one more important part of the story. Since few of the statewide working group members have the budget to work on this type of project, the group approached the Department of Transportation to see if they would take the model policy language and create a guide. The DOT embraced the idea, funded a patient and very talented consultant, so thank you, Annette, from V5, and released it as part of their long list of complete streets resources. So I've got some good news to share. I'm happy to report that we have several early adopters of the full model policy language, including one town that has adopted the entire model policy as an ordinance, and we are quickly becoming one of our champion communities in the state. We've had the policy adopted in tiny rural towns, suburban communities, and bigger cities. So that's my story, and I hope you found it helpful. I'll now turn the presentation back over to Mike Dannemiller.
Thanks, Leanne. So folks, that is a whirlwind tour of some of the new resources Jersey DOT has stepped up to the plate to make available to, and the whole theme here is all of it is about keeping our people safe, keeping projects moving forward, from greenways to streets to school commute. All of these resources are variations on a theme of just making sure we all take care of each other and we produce great things. Two others, before I do a quick Q&A amongst our group, can you advance to the next slide, please? I want to thank everyone for coming to this session and know that Transaction 2020, all these sessions are going to be available for a month. Yes, it's live on October 20, but until November 19, you can download any one of these and get all the credit hours you're probably looking for. Two other sessions I'll highlight, multimodal mobility in the middle of New Jersey. That's Somerset and Mercer counties that Tim Brill was mentioning as we went through. Great session there with Matt Lawson, Anders Holzman, and Jerry Foster. And we have another session, the trials of getting county trails from concept to construction, which really highlights getting from concept through design and into construction on large-scale countywide projects. The Link, which was formerly called Cross Camden County Trail. Jack Swarovski is doing a great job on that. And Chris Vitz from Morris County will highlight details about the NYS&W, the New York, Susquehanna, and Western project that Morris County is leading in Morris and Passaic counties. So there's lots of great resources there. Leanne, could you do the stop sharing so we can see our gallery view? So folks, that's our session. Any initial Q&A for each other before we wrap up?
I've got a question, Tim, about the conservation blueprint. We have several designations in New Jersey for things like opportunity zones or enterprise zones or transit villages. Are those part of the blueprint so that you can access those designations as well?
bad news is that they're not currently part of the blueprint. The good news is they could be, and new layers of data are being added as we speak continuously. The tool is very flexible, very fast, and very adaptable. So those designations could easily be added to the community green space layer if there's enough demand. We've tried to include the latest, best available statewide data. So we don't want it to just become like a local zoning tool or whatever, but where possible, we've tried to provide seamless mapping across political boundaries here. So it's a very powerful way to look at the world here.
Leanne, during your session, you mentioned Sustainable Jersey, but that Sustainable Jersey Complete and Green Streets actions, how does that all work with points and how those get awarded? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Mike. And I wasn't sure I was going to have time for it. So let me bring up a slide that I have that I didn't go in, but I'm glad we have time for now. So if anybody is part of Sustainable Jersey, you know that there are many actions you can apply for. And traditionally, there has been an action on complete streets. That action is expiring and retiring. And we have a new complete and green streets action for all that is debuting shortly. So I'm going to give you some tips and suggestions about the new action. Because if you're interested in Sustainable Jersey and those that are, you can receive up to 25 points. So what we did was, instead of having two separate actions for Sustainable Jersey, adopting a complete streets policy and implementing complete streets, it's now all combined into a complete and green streets for all action. And there are 3 tiers to this action. So the first tier is what we're calling Adopt a Good, Complete and Green Streets for All policy. And that is a resolution with several minimum standards. However, the minimum standards do still address things like health, equity, green streets, and economic improvements. So that, if you do that, that is worth 10 points. The second tier is Adopt a Better Complete and Green Streets for All policy. And what we mean by better is if you do the next step, which would be making sure you adopt a policy that includes checklists, or create an advisory committee, do some training, and identify some of the municipal plans you have, like master plans, that may need to be updated now that you have an updated or a new Complete and Green Streets policy. And finally, our last tier is tier 3. And this is worthy of 25 points, which in Sustainable Jersey world, that's pretty good. And that is adopting the Complete and Green Streets policy as an ordinance. So the other benefit in Sustainable Jersey world for adopting an ordinance is you will get a extended points for that policy, which means you don't have to come back in 3 years to do maintenance on your actions. Those points for an ordinance will not expire for 10 years. So that's pretty good. It's really maybe worth looking into adopting an ordinance so that you can get those 25 points and not revisit this for about 10 years. And once again, I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but I am the reviewer for these. Yes, it's me who has to reject or accept those who are submitting for points. And I really hate rejecting policies that have already been adopted that were so close. So what I would really rather be doing is, if you do have a draft policy you're looking, or updating your policy into the new Complete and Green Streets language, please send the draft to me before you go to adoption, and I will do a complete Sustainable Jersey review to make sure that what you adopt will get you the points that you're looking for. So one of the things we did create in order to help you through these tiers, because it's kind of a lot and we realize that you might need a little bit more to walk through it, is we have a new worksheet for this action. So in the worksheet, it's kind of like its own checklist where it tells you exactly what's needed for each tier and what you have to submit. And then you go through this worksheet to say, yes, I did this part. Yes, I did this part. And that way, if there is something missing, you can check it on the worksheet and it should show you, if you're missing some language or what you did is actually more than tier 1. Maybe you did enough to get tier 2. So this is debuting very shortly on the Sustainable Jersey website. Anybody who has submitted for Complete Streets policy action points in this calendar year will still be reviewed under the old action, but it will retire as of the end of 2020. So be prepared.
That sounds great. Thanks. I appreciate that insight. I did have one other question. You had mentioned some stellar municipality actually had stepped up and adopted the whole new Complete and Green Street model policy, but not just through resolution, but I think it was ordinance. Who was that?
I'm glad you asked that question too. And I'm really thrilled to say it was Eatontown. So congratulations to Eatontown. They took the model policy language, as you can download from the Department of Transportation website, as a whole and created a brand new ordinance. And this did a few things that were really brilliant. So as developers come forward in Eatontown, they look at the checklist that's adopted as part of this ordinance. They submit a completed checklist to the planning board reviews it, and it starts that conversation that you want to have with developers to make sure that you have things like sidewalks on both sides of the streets and not just one, or that the property is very close to an intersection that may need some other improvements, like making sure seniors get across the street. And I will say, from talking quite a bit with Eatontown, this is exactly what has happened for them. The planning board has now become a fantastic place that asks those questions when developers come forward and propose a new senior development. Now they're saying, oh, make sure you complete our checklist, bring it as part of your development review, and we'll make sure that we're really accommodating the safety needs of the seniors at this new development that's going in. So they did a fantastic job. The mayor has said personally he really loves how this is turning out, and they really are quickly becoming one of our champion towns in New Jersey.
Elise, anything to wrap us up with?
We have a lot going on right now, I think, not just in New Jersey, but with our neighbors in Pennsylvania. A lot of connectivity. We talked about the circuit trails, and the department has some local planning studies my office is doing in some of the major cities in New Jersey right now. We're also looking forward to the update to the New Jersey Trails Plan. And I just see a very bright future for trails and greenways across the state of New Jersey, both for transportation, health, and recreation. I think it's going to be a great system soon.
Excellent. Okay. Well, folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you for signing in.
You're good to go.
Oh, Elise,
well, thank you very much for an awesome presentation, and all of you speakers. Since this was pre-recorded, what I'm going to do at this time is hand it over to Mike, who was the moderator at the time, to handle all of the PDH questions. And should any of you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll answer them as well. So, Mike?
Excellent. Thank you, Luigi. And thank you, everyone. I'm really glad you carved out a little bit of time to join us for this first session of ITE. I was thrilled to be able to do more than a reprise. We did that presentation, obviously, previously, but I'm thrilled to share that with the ITE community, because really, this is the group who's going to help make things happen. We're talking about, taking this complete streets policy and Greenway guide and using the mapping tools really to implement change. And especially with the changes we've seen in the traveling environment over these last several months, realize just how important it is for people to be able to get around under their own power safely and make sure that all of that is convenient and available. And we want to set people up for success. We want to give the engineers tools and the ability, the carte blanche to be able to say, hey, I know about good design. Let me do it. And here's how I'm going to justify it and make sure it moves forward. So that jumps us right into the first of our questions. I'm going to read this off to our panel. I hope everybody can see our expert group of panelists that's all here live now. First question, I'm just going to read off of here. How can advocates prepare their projects to be competitive for the various funding sources used to finance roadway enhancements? And this is something often they're going to lean on-call engineers, municipal county engineers to put together these funding applications. Team, how can they make sure that they're going to set themselves up to be competitive for funding?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. At first, you really need to know the background of the grant that you're applying for. You know, there are different types of grants with different types of requirements. I had one in my own town where they applied for a Safe Routes to School grant for a bike path. However, everybody knew the school was going to close in a couple years, so that really wasn't going to get more kids to walk and bike to school, which is the whole purpose of the grant. So that was the wrong one to go for. They should have gone for a bikeways grant. You should really know the details of the programs that you want to apply for and look for some expertise there. In New Jersey, at least, there are people. We have a bicycle and pedestrian resource center that can help people. We have transportation management associations who can help people, even the staff at our own Department of Transportation. And there's a lot on our websites now, so we can point you to all sorts of resources.
And I'm going to throw a couple thoughts in just because I do grant training. I'm not a grant reviewer, but I do talk to the folks who do. Make sure you have good pictures that tell your story. Nothing helps the folks writing the application as much as you being very clear about where the project is, what the boundaries are, showing pictures during the times where you're saying maybe there's a safety issue. So like Elise mentioned, Safe Routes to School. I know it's a little bit difficult during COVID, but if you have schools in session, take pictures at arrival or dismissal to show the complicated issues with safety. So use your pictures to tell the story, and make sure you have the whole story in there so the grant applicant reviewers don't have to guess what you're trying to tell them. And also, I think the other big thing that I've seen it sometimes when I've seen applications after the fact is if the problem statement in the application is talking about, say, speed, that they're unsafe driving speeds, but then what you apply for actually doesn't slow down drivers, then you have a mismatch. So whatever your problem statement is, come up with the engineering solutions that do address that safety issue and not just something, you know, don't go for the basic, go for the big time. You know, if it's slowing drivers down, then talk about traffic calming. Don't just talk about another sign in the road. And Mike, you do a lot of grant applications. Do you have anything to add?
Really, I think you guys have covered that one. We've got several other questions. If you're okay with it, I'm going to move on to the next. And this is all our each questions to start off with. So team, is there a document that details typical Greenway development process?
Well, I can jump in on that one, Mike. Thanks for that question. Yes, well, we shared it with you in the presentation before, but I'll reiterate the Greenway's guidebook that's available through Together North Jersey. This is a complete guidebook that tells you just step by step from beginning to end, from the beginning of the planning process all the way to the end of opening and iteration after that. So that can be found once again on the togethernorthjersey.com site, and that's complete words, togethernorthjersey.com. You will scroll over to the task forces and look for the livable task force, and then you will see it right there on the home page of the livable task force for Together North Jersey. If you have any questions about the guidebook, feel free to contact me at njit@creativeplacemaking.njit.edu. But it's a pretty good, well, I shouldn't say pretty good, I don't want to qualify it. It's a very good resource from start to finish. Also, there's other guidance through the Sustainable Jersey, Complete Streets, and other action steps related to greenways that is worth looking at sustainablejersey.org.
Great, thank you. That does bring me to, I'm going to back up 2 steps. Now, let's just make sure we all know what we're talking about when we use some of this jargon. I'm just going to ask a general question that probably has some good insight. What is a greenway?
I mean, I'll take that. Greenways are safe and attractive connections between open spaces, employers, transit stops, neighborhoods, trying to make a case for recreational amenities as well as transportation amenities in the process. Many times they're off-road, but they can be side paths to existing road structures, railways, canals. There's a lot of different applications that can be developed, but the idea is to connect green spaces from one to another and take advantage where appropriate.
Absolutely. And, the diversity of context that you bring up, one great example there, Morris Canal Greenway. If you're up at Lake Hopatcong and you want to just glide downhill, you can go all the way to Delaware, you can go all the way to the Hudson. Once that trail is done, it's just going to be a trail where the mules used to walk when they were pulling those canal boats. Sure, there's some inclined planes, and I know there's some experts on this call right now that know that the creation of the Morris Canal Greenway helped to drive that innovation. The engineering from over 100 years ago was top-notch worldwide. There was some great development that happened then. And if now we could just get back to being able to go for a walk where the mules used to walk, that would be great. So
Mike, remind me, I believe that once complete, and it's moving along pretty quickly, that will be one of the longest, if not the longest, continuous greenway in the country, right? Is that correct?
I'm not, certainly in New Jersey, it'll be 111 miles, really coast to coast in Jersey. I think there are some trails out in the Midwest that will give that a run for its money. Maine's got a really long one, a down east trail up in Maine, which is along a rail corridor. I'm not certain about longest. It may be, and I would love to have that claim to fame, but I'm not certain.
Well, it's one of the top ones anyway.
Don't forget about the East Coast Greenway, too.
Well, that's only 3,000 miles, so you have to get from the border to Key West. But it's not continuous. They've got a lot of work to do, just like it being the urban sister to the Appalachian Trail, which evolves every year. It gets better, and it's opportunistic, and it's always moving from the on-road connections today to the off-road true greenway corridors that it would love to be on. So yes, there's a lot of that. Okay, I'm talking about mapping and large scale and what resources are available. Our next question, where can New Jersey engineers, municipalities, advocates, whoever, find real-time geospatial tools to support their planning and engineering and conservation efforts? Tim, that one's probably headed your way.
Yeah, the New Jersey Conservation Foundation has worked closely with Rowan University and the Nature Conservancy on a new, really user-friendly tool to bring together many layers of geospatial information. And we encourage everyone to explore this conservation blueprint as presented in my segment in the panel discussion. Just go online and type in NJMAP, M-A-P, and the number 2, and get started exploring the tool here. And it continues to evolve. We're adding new information all the time. with respect to already preserved spaces that you may want to consider, but there's a lot of information that will enable you to look at the region as a whole, as well as down to the parcel specific data online now. And it's a lot easier than tapping into many other sources of GIS data in my experience. So it can really be helpful if you're working with local boards and elected officials to help explain and encourage them to explore options related to that development tool.
Tim, I'll reinforce to everybody on the session right now. You do not have to be a GIS guru in order to be able to do that. You can work at Google Maps, you can work this. It's got toggles for bringing data layers on and off that are very intuitive. First time looking at it, you can have productive time and taking a look at what resources are available there. It's really easy to use, which I appreciated.
And we do have folks available to respond to questions. And I think I made the mistake of including my cell phone number in the presentation. And I'm always open to contacts of any kind with questions. I'm a geographer by degree and really appreciate. There you go.
Elise was happy with that one.
Whatever it takes.
Excellent. Okay, so keeping equity in mind, knowing project prioritization, and making sure that we're being comprehensive in our outreach in every step of a process. I want to ask this last of the PDH questions. This is for the team. How can people ensure that roadway enhancement projects are accessible for all modes of transportation, for all ages, all abilities? And Elise, I'll target you to kick someone off.
Well, it's an interesting conversation I had with somebody. Actually, you know her, Mike. She's an advocate in your town about educating engineers and planners about complete streets. And she asked if maybe we could get the engineers to ride a bike through the area so that they understand the issues. And I said there was this great program at Michigan DOT that actually did that. And they put project engineers on bicycles and made them ride through their project areas. I think if you can get your engineers and planners, you know, they're people too, just have them go out for a walk with you or a bike ride with you, you know, so they can start to understand what you're talking about when you say you can't cross a street safely. I think that's, you know, try to make the personal connections. I go on bike rides with one of my county engineers every now and then, so he understands now.
Excellent. Yes. Elise, that is exactly what I did when I was doing a job through Smart Growth America, National Complete Streets Coalition. Going across Massachusetts and doing complete street training sessions all the way across the state. I brought a wheelchair with me, and I put this big, burly, strong, way stronger than me guy in a wheelchair and say, okay, go straight on this sidewalk. And when you get to that driveway apron, you'll fall out into the street when you hit that cross slope that's at 8% or so. And to watch somebody just struggle to go straight on a driveway they designed and possibly even help construct, they're saying, wow, that cross slope on a sidewalk is a big deal. That personal
they should think about, you know, what it's going to be like for their grandmother or their child if they went through that intersection. You know, think about those types of people when they design, and I think they'll get it.
And I'll just share with the group, I broke a bone in my foot last fall and had the personal experience of using trails on a knee scooter, but there are all kind of assisted devices coming along to help people with mobility challenges take advantage of many of these resources for, as I say, transportation and recreational purposes. And it's really important that we continue to make these efforts over time that will come together in terms of a network of accessibility.
Absolutely.
Hey, Mike, one of the questions in chat is about specific guidelines, manuals for best practices on ADAs and crossings, street crossings for trails.
Yes, what I'm seeing in the chat. Any guidelines, manuals, experience on best practices, designing trails, greenways, crossings at existing signalized intersections, i.e. crosswalk widths, ADA, accessibility. Anybody else want to hit that first?
There is some very good work that has come out of AARP, from the National AARP in New Jersey, the AARP New Jersey. Most states have a branch. But their livability guidelines and textbooks or how-to books are phenomenal, and they touch all aspects of this kind of thing, considering mobility, access, and people of all ages. ARP has really expanded its lens to include people of all ages. So those are free and available on the aarp.org site. Highly recommend them.
Sure. And I'll point out two NJDOT resources that maybe not everybody knows about. Back in, it was 2017 when this got published. My copy's a little battered and worn, but New Jersey DOT Complete Streets Design Guide. Now, it's not the roadway design manual. There's a planning document, so it's guidance, but it has great insights, lots of examples of good projects. And if you're talking about greenways, the Planning for Greenways guidebook for New Jersey communities talks both process and also examples about a little bit about design as well. So there's some great resources right on the DOT site.
And one of the things we're hoping to do is update the New Jersey Trails Plan, and part of that would be identifying crossings that are in need of safe treatment. So we're probably going to have to look at some guidelines too. I know there's some from the Rails to Trails Conservancy on their website, and I believe NACDO has a guide. It might not be their guide, but there's the Designing Sidewalks and Trails for Access that has many volumes to it, but that's what we're still using today.
So I have my show and tell as well, Mike. Here's a roadmap to livability transportation workbook from AARP. Is that showing or is that moving? You see that? Looks a little blurry on my screen. And then there's another called Creating Parks and Public Spaces. I don't think I'm showing this, am I?
I think your video froze. We hear you fine. Just say them.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Your audio is great, but your video froze.
Yeah. Well, rural America and broadband connectivity. Anyway, the one I'm looking at is called Creating Parks and Public Spaces for People of All Ages, a step-by-step guide, and a roadmap to livability transportation workbook. So that's at aarp.org, livability roadmap.
Okay. Now, I think you'll be able to wrap up with, there's a comment here that I think any of our presenters could share an insight or two about. One of our participants said, moving complete streets from policy to practice is our biggest challenge. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone want to?
That's for sure.
Yeah, take it from a planner who is married to an engineer. It's a lot of times it's about the lingo, but other times it's just about the institutional barriers that there are in place that you don't even realize until you start to try to do some of these things to make cars slow down and to make crossings easier. At all levels, there are barriers that they can be worked through, though. It's going to take time, and you need to find people who are willing to work with you.
Yeah, I'll just share, a lot of the conservation community has focused efforts in rural areas in the state for many decades, but we're really rediscovering opportunities in urban and older suburban areas that are real exciting in terms of making these kinds of connections that people use as access to open spaces and transportation. It's a really interesting time to enable diverse groups. And I encourage the engineers to take the time to assemble advisory committees to really think through these projects and the opportunities they present. The diversity of involving people in the neighborhoods where these trail facilities and improvements are placed, really important.
Yeah, I'll just build off what Tim said, because we're seeing a lot of really great opportunities where the municipalities that have put together these teams or an advisory group, especially where they've made them more formal by ordinance, are really going gangbusters on some of the Complete Streets implementation. And it's been helpful. I hear back from the engineers who are involved with these groups for help for prioritizing, for identifying those hot spots, for finding those projects that are going to be an early win where they aren't always contentious. And so having that advisory group can be really helpful to the engineers if you're looking to get these things done in a town. And then I'll further that with if towns have a policy and they've done a resolution, sometimes they forget. Sometimes a whole new slate of newly elected officials comes into place and they're not aware of this. And so we're seeing the towns that have also taken their resolutions and then adopted them as ordinances are doing a lot better with Complete Streets implementation as well. And so the ordinance now is something searchable in the town laws, and you can go look up the codes. They become more integrated into planning board reviews and then the developers can get a chance to take a look at these ordinances. And when developers come with projects, are the smart ones are including the Complete Streets element in them.
Awesome team. I think that is just about a wrap. I think we're just about to get the hook. We're coming up on our time limit. I'm thrilled we were able to share these resources and especially the insights just now tailored for our engineering community. And everybody, the engineers, give them the right targets. It's not only level of service. If we're talking about not just get cars through quickly, but how about we have crash reduction? How about lives saved? If we can have less fatalities, less serious injuries, if that's our marker, if that's our metric for success on a project, then I think that we will have the civil side of civil engineering really mastered, more than just taking care of trucks and rain.
Great. Well, Mike, I want to thank you, along with our great panelists, Elise, Tim, Leanne, and Suzanne. I want to thank you for a riveting presentation. It was very entertaining as well, and thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Pleasure to be with you.
Great job.
Okay, so I just wanted a couple of housekeeping things as well, just so everybody knows. People were asking, they didn't see the link for the PDHs. The link will be emailed to all the members and anybody who's registered, so don't worry about that. That will be coming. We do have a break until 3 p.m. where our second session starts, and don't leave though, because during our break we have our first hot seat interview, which is also going to take place, so you're not going to want to go anywhere. So thank you again, and we'll see you shortly.
Hello everybody, welcome to the 2021 ITE Northeastern District meeting. My name is Luigi Casanelli. I'm a traffic engineer and part-time YouTuber. Today we're going to be conducting hot seat interviews where we ask hot questions while we eat even hotter chicken wings. And today we have Adam Levine, our special guest. Adam, welcome.
Luigi, thank you.
So, a couple of house rules I just want to go over before we start the interview. So, before we start, once you have your first chicken wing, make sure you don't rub your eyes. I'm telling everybody this, okay?
Understand.
The next one, you did sign the waiver not to sue IT, right? I have it right here, no?
Yes.
And
of course.
finally,
Might regret that.
and finally, I think I may have lip gloss somewhere, but if you need it, I have it in the bag. Oh, you have it. Okay, you're better than me. Excellent, excellent. So before we start, I just want to let everybody know that are watching this. I know what you must be thinking. Oh, this is going to be, you're going to laugh at us eating all these hot sauces and everything. But what I really want to highlight is 10 amazing health benefits of eating hot peppers, okay? Benefits the digestive tract, which I can attest to, promotes a healthy heart, mitigates migraines, relieves joint pain, improves metabolism. I've lost 2 pounds since yesterday, my last interview. It quells psoriasis, reduces cancer, fights the flu, prevents bad breath, and prevents allergies. So Adam, who do you think is going to have the last laugh?
They are, Luigi, they are.
I was trying. All right, so.
Good try.
All right, I was trying to be convincing. But anyways, with that, so before I ask you a question, we're going to have our first chicken wing, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so let's start.
This one right here, right?
Yeah, the one on the left. And
Okay.
actually, I have to get it's all right?
Sure.
Just a thing to put your chicken wing down. I forgot to do that before we started.
Okay.
So the one left to right. So we're doing the first one. It's the Monkey Howler.
Okay.
And this one here is a Scoville level of 400.
Oh, all right.
So,
Try.
cheers.
Cheers.
That one's not too bad.
So far, we're okay. I know where this is going though, so.
Trying to prepare you.
Thank you, thank you. I think I actually can drink water on this one. Won't make it too much worse.
So Adam, tell us about your passionate story, career path, and how it helped you get to your current position.
Well, I've got a little bit of, I guess, a meandering career path compared with some of my peers and my friends in the field. I have got an engineering degree, civil engineering degree from my university, but then I kind of meandered a bit within the Department of Transportation. I grew up on Long Island, so I was very happy when I was able to get a position at our Long Island office, and I was there for about 12 or 13 years. And I was actually, one of the things that I know we're going to talk a little bit later about, recommendations for younger staff. I took opportunities, when they came along. So there were opportunities where I could, get into different groups. I took a look around at different aspects of our department. We have a design group, a construction group, a traffic group, other groups. And at the time, we had a rotation program that actually allowed us to work a little bit of time in each one. So you get to see what each group does, and that gives you great experience. You meet great people. And I was able to see that, you don't just have to sit in a design squad for your entire career. There are plenty of things that the Department of Transportation gets involved with. So I was fortunate enough to be able to get involved with, in the 1990s, computer visualizations of our construction projects, and value engineering when that was kind of a new concept, and some of the other, getting involved with the computer side of our house, which was, also relatively new in the 1990s. So, it was fun to get really my fingers, into some of those things. It was a great experience. And then, the unfortunate events of September 11th sent our department into a mode of, we need to repair the highway right next to the World Trade Center, and they put out a call around the agency for folks who would be interested in coming in to help, and I raised my hand. Fortunately, I knew one of the other people who was there, and he said, yeah, we're still bringing people in. Joe Brown, he's my former boss, regional director, now at Suffolk County DPW. He said, come on down and, we'll interview you, and took a position there, and that was great. It was working on a major project for a few years, almost like national level interest in the project. And from there, I also, this was another kind of meandering path. I was out at a wedding in Mattituck and taking the train back to my apartment in Manhattan, and I got a call from a coworker in our Queens office. Would you be interested in being our public information officer? What is that? I don't even know, what a public information, I'm an engineer, why would you? I think I might have written an article for a newsletter, and somebody saw it and said, maybe you can put a couple words together. So they gave me that opportunity, and I said, well, I'll give it a try. I enjoyed that. And then the next thing, there was a position at one of our transportation management centers, the one in our Hudson Valley office in Westchester. And it's interesting that the parallels between being a public information officer and a TMC manager, it's all about communications. So,
By the way, that's next door to my house.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, have you been there?
Once, a while back when it first opened.
All right. Great place, and much busier now, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But so that led to, so I didn't really come up through the ground floor of our traffic group. I kind of bounced around from our design group to major project to, communications, and then into our TMC. And from there, I moved up through our traffic group in the Hudson Valley, and now here in New York City. So it's been great. I've really loved it.
It sounds like you have a nice, well-rounded view of traffic engineering, project management, and civil engineering as a whole.
It has worked out well, yes. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
This time a year ago, I said,
you might be new to YouTube, you may have been trying to get your YouTube channel to grow for a while and you're just not getting the results that you want. It could be because you've been making a lot of mistakes when it comes to your YouTube. You might be new to YouTube, you may have been trying to get your YouTube channel to grow for a while and you're just not.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the first hot seat interview. And just so everybody knows, the PDHs for the first session, we're going to post a link again right now for those of you who do not receive it at the end of the last one. And for this session, we'll post it at the end of this session. So our next session, we have 3 great speakers who are going to speak on a potpourri of different topics. And we have Noah Budnick, who is the Senior Director for Programs and Operations at Together for Safer Roads. Rebecca Brown, who is the Senior Project Manager for GPI. And we have Marissa Torallo, who is the Senior Technical Director at AKRF. So without anything further, let's get into the next presentation.
Technical Director with AKRF, specializing in traffic signal and traffic adaptive systems. Today I'm going to talk about the current state of many of our traffic signal and transportation systems in the region, the role adaptive can play, and some of the recent case studies that demonstrate the diverse opportunities with adaptive. So I'm going to start by going over some of the issues that have been arising for municipalities with maintaining their traffic signals. I'm also going to briefly discuss current mobility trends and improvements and how that can tie into opportunities to deploy adaptive. And then I'll go through several case studies that kind of showcase the variety of opportunities for adaptive deployment and wrap up with some additional applications that we're currently pursuing in the region and complementing technologies being deployed with the adaptive systems. For many municipalities, particularly those that don't do their signal maintenance in-house, replacing failing traffic signals with whatever the maintenance contractor has on hand is commonplace. Over the years, without a clear direction on the type of the system that the municipality is looking to operate, this resulted in a wide range of controllers with various softwares and functionalities. And while controllers are standardized by NEMA and NTCIP protocols, the actual practice of operating a variety of controller versions with all of this different firmware and software is a difficult area of traffic engineering to navigate, particularly for smaller agencies and local government. Now what we're seeing is many municipalities looking for assistance going forward in managing their signal assets and implementing a consistent system throughout. Similarly, many changes have occurred in how our communities live, work, and play since the original design and construction of our roadway and traffic signal systems. And as we begin to reimagine our roadways, we're no longer focused solely on moving commuters as quickly as possible. We're also striving to make our transportation systems safer, smarter, and more sustainable in an effort to improve operations for all of the users in our communities. Keeping these trends in mind as we begin planning the modernization of our signal systems and our transportation infrastructure presents an opportunity for adaptive applications, which can make our systems more flexible and smarter for the future of our communities. One of the first questions and concerns we've heard from our municipalities is how does adaptive differ from the traffic signal systems they have today, and dispelling the myth that these systems are only for very specific applications and require a great deal of infrastructure and investment to operate. What we highlight is that an adaptive system is an additional application to a modern signal system, either entirely software-based or with some additional cabinet hardware, depending on the application. This application is capable of adjusting in real time the cycle lengths, splits, offsets, and in some cases phase sequence based on the actual demand at the intersection at that time. We do this in order to minimize delays, improve progression, and decrease travel time. This is of particular importance in areas seeing traffic fluctuations throughout the day or a lot of development and land use changes in the community, as many local time of day plans are not updated on a regular basis due to limited resources. As we're in a time of greater transportation unknowns and fluctuations in travel patterns are difficult to predict, these systems offer an even greater benefit in both monitoring and adapting to the daily mobility demands. All of these systems rely on good detection and communication to operate, which can present a challenge for smaller communities. However, there are a number of wireless communication solutions and cloud-based platforms to allow smaller communities to implement an adaptive with minimal hardwired infrastructure when necessary. Commercial corridors are generally one of the first applications that come to mind for adaptive. The system is actually the first adaptive Region 8 of New York State DOT owned and maintained, and it's located along US Route 6 in the town of Cortland, New York. The system procurement was unique in that it was developed as an improvement measure associated with the proposed Cortland Crossing commercial development, which meant the developer was responsible for funding and constructing the system, which was then turned over to the town and state. This has become more commonplace in recent years, with permit applicants helping to fund the signal infrastructure improvements needed by New York State DOT. US Route 6 is the main corridor through the town of Cortland, with two substantial commercial developments across the street from one another. They contain local retail, including the main grocery store in the town, as well as several restaurants and big box retailers. Adjacent to the developments is one of the town's two elementary schools, adding bus and school traffic to the corridor, as well as the Mohegan Lake Firehouse, which necessitated a preemption system for emergency response along the corridor. In addition, the corridor is a main commuter route with the Taconic State Parkway and Bear Mountain Parkway close by. The town, state, and AKRF conducted a post-implementation study, as it was the first adaptive in the region, and this was to assess the benefits with the adaptive when the corridor had recently been retimed and there was heavy congestion during the commuter peak periods, two scenarios that made us believe that it would limit the functionality of the adaptive. For the northbound direction, the results were a slight increase in travel time in the AM peak hour, with nominal change in the midday and a 10% reduction in travel time in the PM. This was the critical peak hour of our traffic study analysis. We also saw a 48% reduction in travel times northbound during the Saturday midday. However, this is compared to running the signal uncoordinated, as was done prior to the adaptive. Nonetheless, it does speak to where adaptive offers additional benefits when time of day plans are not regularly updated or provided specifically for off-peak periods. In the southbound direction, we saw a greater reduction in the midday and PM travel times with nominal change during the AM peak period. And again, a sizable reduction in the Saturday travel time of approximately 33%. Another interesting metric was the congestion index, which noted the congestion along the corridor compared to free flow conditions throughout the day. Here, the gray shows the congestion before adaptive, and the green is after the adaptive activation. What was notable from this data was the increase in congestion during the overnight hours consistently from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. It turns out that the vendor usually programs the adaptive to shut off overnight and run free during those hours, which correlated to these periods of increased congestion. As both the before and after ran free overnight from 9 to 6, this also indicated that traffic may have increased along the corridor between the time of the before and after studies. The same trend existed in the southbound direction, and here you can really see where the adaptive brought down the congestion during that Saturday peak period. Another application type I want to briefly touch on that's less thought of when it comes to adaptive deployment is for complete streets initiatives. This adaptive evaluation originated from a complete streets study by New York State DOT along Route 17 in Sloatsburg, New York, where they had developed an option to reduce 4 travel lanes to 2 with a middle turning lane and additional pedestrian facilities. However, the road diet resulted in greater vehicle congestion, which was a sticking point for the design. For this application, we took the SynchroSim traffic model developed by New York State DOT and used virtual controller logic to develop a real-time virtual adaptive to show the benefits of adaptive with the proposed road diet. On the left, you have the without Synchro Green model, and on the right is the with Synchro Green model. And what you can immediately see from looking at these side by side is the spacing of the vehicles, the consistent travel and throughput with the Synchro Green adaptive that's really just allowing for a better flow of traffic. Generally, the optimized AM coordinated signal plans operate the network well, and the adaptive did not show measurable improvements when operating during the AM peak period. However, during the PM peak hour, the network benefited from the system's ability to open up the bandwidth and achieve more throughput on the main line, resulting in a reduction in travel time of approximately 22% and also in vehicle hours of delay. Another unlikely application is where substantial standard infrastructure improvements are being made, as is the case with the region's first diverging diamond interchange on Route 17 in Woodbury, New York. Interchange is a New York State DOT design build project by Yonkers Contracting Company and HNTB, and it includes the region's first diverging diamond interchange, a new coordinated signal system, and additional infrastructure improvements. Following construction completion, an optimization program was developed, which is currently underway by AKRF and Highway Tech, the adaptive vendor, to plan for, install, and monitor an adaptive system to further manage the fluctuations in traffic demand and patterns in this area. The optimization study includes simulating the adaptive operations using software in the loop simulation tool with SimTraffic before deployment to determine the potential operational improvements that could occur beyond the newly coordinated signal system with the new interchange and the extensive roadway improvements. Here is the adaptive model of the diverging diamond interchange portion of the corridor. This system is really unique in that with the diverging diamond, your coordinated movements are in conflict with one another and can't travel together. So it's imperative that the system can balance progression between the two directions as compared to a standard corridor where you can allow both directions of the main corridor to travel together with substantial allocation of green time. Large intersections also include long pedestrian clearance intervals, which can throw a standard coordinated signal system out of coordination and cause increased vehicular delay depending on how often the pedestrian crossing is activated. The simulation results indicated an anticipated travel time improvement beyond the new coordinated signal system in the critical eastbound direction during all peak periods analyzed, in addition to providing more flexibility than a standard traffic signal system to handle the fluctuations that occur in this area. In general, the southbound direction, which is away from the outlet mall, had much better travel times to begin with and were mostly unchanged with the reduction in the eastbound travel times. The adaptive system also reduced the number of stops along the corridor, improving the progression through the interchange. Other applications include evacuation and bypass routes, where an incident can cause unpredictable spikes in travel demand along the adjacent corridors. Also, special events are a common application, such as the Meadowlands adaptive system. And recently, we've seen an increase in evaluating adaptive systems near transit hubs. New York State DOT recently deployed a system near the Beacon train station, and ACRF is currently evaluating a system for the town of Greenberg along the East Hartsdale Avenue corridor associated with their train station demand. Lastly, oftentimes the adaptive system alone is not the only new technology being deployed for municipalities. Newer detection technologies, such as video detection, is often installed hand in hand with adaptive, as are central management softwares to oversee and better manage both the adaptive and the standard signal systems. Automated traffic signal performance measures also have the capability to enhance an adaptive system and evaluate its success long term. Finally, adaptive can also be seen as a stepping stone to connected vehicles and smart cities, starting to provide some of the infrastructure for the V2I and I2V communication. In conclusion, we found there is a wider range of applications for adaptive and the flexibility that they provide beyond the most commonly recognized applications, which can be beneficial to both large agencies and smaller municipalities. We've also found detailed planning and initial evaluation is imperative to the long-term success of an adaptive system. This type of upfront planning allows for better budgeting, phasing, and long-term monitoring, and helps to set expectations prior to an install. So thank you again for attending our session today, and I look forward to answering some of your questions at the end. If you'd like to discuss this presentation or a specific adaptive application, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Hi all, this is Noah Budnick, Senior Director of Programs and Operations at Together for Safer Roads. Thanks for having me here today to present to ITE's Northeastern District. I want to thank Amir for inviting me and coordinating everything. It's great to introduce Together for Safer Roads to many of you and to talk about our Future Roads initiative. Together for Safer Roads is a relatively new organization. We're a nonprofit business organization that works around the world to make businesses more active participants in Vision Zero and similarly ambitious road safety initiatives. We were founded in response to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals about 5 years ago. So our members were looking for ways to be more involved on the ground in saving lives in streets. We often describe ourselves as a corporate social accelerator, which really means finding very specific opportunities where our members can take action to be part of safety initiatives. We have 3 program areas: Safer Cities, Safer Companies and Fleets, and the Safer Roads Studio. Safer Cities is where we serve as advisors to mayors and other senior staff at the local level, helping them solve their most pressing traffic safety problems. Safer Companies and Fleets works on both data and technology, but also brings a lot of attention to smaller mid-sized fleets, which our research has found are under-resourced when it comes to safety. And the Safer Roads Studio is our hub for innovation. I'll talk about that more on the next slide. The Safer Roads Studio brings together corporate leaders, startups, entrepreneurs, and others to leverage data and technology for making the roads safer. I think people are familiar with the number of new startups that are appearing every week talking about disrupting transportation as we know it and promising amazing safety gains. You know, we are hopeful for these new technologies, and we can see the potential of having better data and technology to save more lives faster. But we also make sure that we define problems first, that we don't enter scenarios where there's a great solution just looking for a problem. So that's why we work with practitioners like you on the ground to lead this work. The Safe Roads Studio operates in 3 areas: fleets, roads, and the network. The Safe Roads Network, we feel, is important to connect established leaders like yourselves with relatively new organizations and to promote cross-sector conversations there's a lot of learning that can happen both on the technology side, on the practitioner side, but also just on the business side and learning how to set up an organization. The fleets and roads parts of our work I see as the testing grounds for potential technologies that can matriculate up into our other program areas. For example, we've done a lot of work with near miss analysis, working with startups on very small projects and then scaling that, going from a few blocks to citywide initiatives. All of our work in the Safe Roads Studio employs a design thinking process. Again, we start with defining a problem and then source a solution, not the opposite. The process starts with bringing together a core leadership team that can do that problem definition. Folks like you that have real world experience and know what are the barriers to saving more lives faster. With a core leadership team, we agree on a well-defined problem statement, and then with our members and network, we go out and we source innovative solutions to solve that problem. Oftentimes we find multiple possible solutions, and so we have a pitch day where we hear from these technologists on how they can help address the problem that we've defined. And then most importantly, we pilot this solution to solve the problem in the real world. I often think of Together for Safer Roads as a do tank, not a think tank. And while we really respect research and use it in all of our work and build on it, at the end of the day, we want to see change happen on the ground. So we want to be out in communities, trying things out and seeing how they're going to make the road safer and learning from that and sharing that learning. So the Future Road Sprint that we're starting now is really focused on how we can use data and technology to save more lives faster on the roads. And the general problem that we've come across as we've talked to folks like you and many of our colleagues is not having up-to-date information about the built environment. How do we know if the roads have all the safety measures in place, sufficient safety measures that are going to prevent people from being killed and injured as they travel? When we ask that question, what we hit up against is incomplete information, out-of-date information, and imprecise information about how roads are built in the real world. And updating this information, getting new data, takes a lot of time and is very expensive. So how can we have the most up-to-date information about the roads that are out there now so we know where we need to go and make improvements? Now, the opportunity that we think is unique working with our members is tapping into the technology that they're already using on their fleets. Together for Safer Roads members operate some of the largest fleets in the world. And we're talking about companies like UPS, PepsiCo, Anheuser-Busch, Republic Services. Our members also include some of the leading safety technology and telematics companies in the world, companies like CalAmp, Geotab, Samsara, and Autoliv. Now, these fleets are driving around with this technology every day. They're pulling in information, and the fleets are using it for fleet safety management. But what more could be done with this data? And how could we digitize it to make it useful for other safety uses? Now, when it comes to getting up-to-date information on the infrastructure, my head starts to spin when I look at any road and try to catalog what's happening on it and what state it's in. Do streets have sidewalks? What conditions are they in? Are there curb cuts? Are the traffic lights there? Are they working? How do you collect all this information and keep it up to date? This is where we see the opportunity of tapping into the technology that's on these fleets. Sometimes I think about technology-equipped fleets almost like roving data vacuum cleaners. They are driving on our roads every day. They're ingesting video footage and other data, really for fleet safety management. But our members agree that there's much more that could be done with it. And so the question is, where do we start? With all this data coming in, how do we prioritize what to look for and how to put it to use? Machine learning algorithms can be taught to detect specific roadway elements. So which element should we start with? What's the level of detail that we need? What sort of quality data do we need to collect? And then how are we going to put it to use? This is why we like to get in front of audiences like you to invite you to be part of this work, because we need expert practitioners to help us define the problem, set standards for the data, and then put it to use. Now, our members at Together for Safer Roads are great because they're cross-industry and they're really not traditional road safety partners. But all of these companies are very committed to the work, and that's why they're members of Together for Safer Roads. They're already practicing fleet safety management using this technology, but they know they can do more. And so that's why they come to us, because they want specific opportunities where they can play a role in helping make streets safer. Now, the other roles that we have really do rely on expertise like you all have. Having the data is only really a small part of the solution. We need to digitize it, and then we also need to put it to use. And so we invite other partners to join us in this work. Now, there's different levels of being a part of Together for Safer Roads work, and that will definitely depend on each of your individual organizations, of course, your budgets, but also how you see being involved and what sorts of benefits you see in being part of this work. And that's why I'm excited to start this conversation today and just tell you about the Future of Roads initiative, and then hopefully have follow-up conversations with you all to talk in more detail about it, get your feedback on it, which will be extremely helpful, and see if there are ways that you could participate through your organization and with your colleagues. So I'll wrap up there. My contact information is on this slide, along with my colleague Andrew, who leads the day-to-day work of the studio. And I invite you to reach out to me and find 20 or 30 minutes for a follow-up conversation where we can get into more details, get your feedback, and hear how this program might be put to use. So thanks again for having me here today. Really happy to answer any questions right now and hopefully follow up on another call. Bye.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Brown, and I am a senior project manager with Greenman Peterson in Wilmington, Massachusetts. Recently, our office has prepared a number of traffic impact studies for the permitting of adult recreational marijuana dispensaries throughout Massachusetts. One of the challenges that we have faced is how to estimate the trips generated by these types of facilities in the absence of available data from ITE or other resources. The other challenge is in collecting trip rates at the existing facilities and applying them to future facilities when the market is so new and appears to be changing daily. What I would like to do today is walk you through some of the research that GPI has completed on different methods of estimating trips for these types of facilities. I will begin with a little bit of history on marijuana dispensaries in the area, describe the data that is currently publicly available for estimating trips, and then show you the information that we have compiled for various sites throughout the Commonwealth. We have collected data at numerous sites and compared this to 4 different independent variables to assess the best predictors of trips. I'll then talk a little bit about how parking and traffic demand management measures might impact trip generation, and then discuss how patterns and trip rates are changing over time as the market becomes more saturated to determine the most appropriate long-term predictors of trips. Finally, I will show you a couple of case studies from 2 facilities in Massachusetts to see how the empirical trip generation rates compare to actual trip counts at these facilities. So marijuana was first decriminalized in Massachusetts back in 2008. And then the first medical marijuana facilities were legalized in 2012. The sale of recreational marijuana was legalized in 2016, and the very first recreational marijuana facility opened in November of 2018 in Northampton, Massachusetts. And you can see a picture here of the opening from that facility on the very first day, where there was long lines wrapped around the building of people coming to the facility. So when the first few facilities opened, the media reported of these long lines of people wrapping around buildings and cars queued up for miles to get to these facilities. Here are some photos of several of the first few facilities to open in Massachusetts in early 2019, where the media reported miles of traffic queued just trying to enter the facility and long lines of hundreds of people waiting outside. This is one of the reasons why local municipal review boards and the public believe that a new facility in their community will generate thousands of additional vehicles on their roads and create congestion and queues for miles. But what do these facilities actually look like today? Well, you can see from these 4 photos of 5 of those first facilities that opened just a year after their opening, that there's not a whole lot of anything going on. So what's happened? Obviously, people didn't just stop purchasing marijuana. Some might initially think that this is all due to the ongoing pandemic and reserve ahead and online ordering. But obviously, these types of activities, the reserve ahead and online ordering, still require trips to be made for someone to actually pick up the product. So what is actually happening? Many of us may remember years ago when home improvement stores like Lowe's and Home Depot were new and had a huge regional draw because there weren't many around. Over time, as more of these popped up, they started experiencing more of a local draw, and traffic went down significantly, leaving large parking lots half empty. The same is occurring with marijuana dispensaries. When facilities first opened back in 2018, they experienced major regional draws. Now that the market is becoming more saturated and these facilities are becoming like our local coffee shop with one on every corner, they're drawing less trips. So how do we estimate what traffic these facilities might generate in the long term, and how can we plan for opening condition? So there is some data that is available from the Institute of Transportation Trip Generation Manual for marijuana facilities. But the problem with that data is that it's based on a very limited sample size of just 4 studies that are all collected in more rural locations in Colorado and contain a mix of medical and retail sales. So these facilities may not accurately reflect the trips that would be generated by a recreational use only operation in Massachusetts, particularly in urban areas where public transit and walking and biking can reduce the trips. Another source that's also available is Mike on Traffic, which is provided by a fellow traffic engineer, Michael Spack, where Mike Spack has compiled additional data for marijuana dispensaries. However, this data is limited to Colorado and Oregon and reflects an opening condition where he notes that marijuana dispensaries generate 10 times more traffic than specialty retail and 4 times more traffic than pharmacies. In the absence of available data, ITE recommends collecting empirical trip generation data. GPI and other consultants have collected empirical data at multiple locations throughout the Commonwealth, which GPI has compiled from numerous traffic studies to assess the trends in trip generation at these facilities. The data was collected from a total of 10 facilities of varying sizes and locations, both in urban and suburban locations, and having transit or no transit services. Typically, the size of the facility in terms of square footage is the most commonly used independent variable for estimating site-generated trips. So this was the first variable that GPI tested. What we saw was a relatively flat trend line where a group of facilities of similar size generated vastly different numbers of trips. The range of trips of these facilities varied widely from 10 to 90 trips per 1,000 square feet. So why isn't square footage a good predictor? The sites varied greatly in the amount of display area and security space and office space, as well as indoor and outdoor loading within each facility. While we were working on a traffic study for a facility in Beverly, Massachusetts that contained a large floor area with a limited number of cash registers, GPI found that estimating trips based on the square footage resulted in a value for site-generated trips that was far too high to be processed by the number of registers that was provided. This was when GPI began examining other independent variables for estimating trip generation. One of these variables was the number of points of sale or registers provided at each site. It may seem initially unusual to use points of sale or the number of registers as the independent variable, but really it isn't much different than using the number of lanes or number of tellers at a bank. The number of trips generated is really just a function of how many patrons each lane can process over a certain period of time and how much time patrons are willing to wait to be served. So when we considered the number of points of sale as the independent variable, we found much greater consistency in the trip rates with a lesser range and a more linear trend line. This even included the Northampton site that was the first facility to open in the state and had extremely high numbers compared to all the other facilities that we examined. So therefore, this was the data that we used at this Beverly site to estimate the trips that were generated. But why is point of sale a more accurate predictor of site-generated vehicle trips? Well, the answer to that might be pretty simple, actually. So partially due to local concerns over traffic volumes and parking demand, and partially due to the need to control the number of patrons on site due to COVID-19, numerous facilities have adopted parking and traffic demand management strategies. These include appointment-only scheduling to minimize the number of people on site and reduce the lines at the register, as well as reserve ahead products to minimize the time required for on-site for patrons, for selecting products and reducing transaction times, as well as curbside pickup that's also been offered to reduce the number of people inside the store and minimize the contact between patrons and employees. With implementation of such measures, these facilities can control and predict the number of patrons visiting the site during any hour of the day. Appointment slots can be intentionally scheduled to accommodate typical transaction times and ensure that on-site demand does not exceed the ability of the available registers to process. So what happens when these measures get eliminated? What will then provide the best predictor for trip generation rates? So to assess this, we looked at trip generation rates over time to see whether there was any consistency in the data. And one thing that I want to note is that all but one of these counts was collected prior to February of 2020, when the pandemic really hit and started to impact traffic volumes throughout Massachusetts. And the results show a slight downward trend in trip generation that was already occurring from October 2018 to December 2019 in terms of the trip rate per 1,000 square feet that was experienced by marijuana facilities as the market became more saturated. So it's reasonable to expect that this trend will continue as more facilities are opened. The downward trend in the trip rates per square footage may also indicate that the market is not saturated enough to assess whether there is actually a significant relationship between the square footage and the number of trips that are being generated by these facilities. But when we take a look at the point of sale and we look at those trip rates over time, what we see is that they've remained fairly constant. And this is an indicator that point of sale may be a better predictor of site-generated trips, both in the short term and in the long term, based on those transportation demand management measures continuing to be in place to control this traffic. When we looked at the data a little closer for the per 1,000 square feet, we noticed that there was a cluster of outliers that appeared in the downward trend line that you can see here. And examining what might be a little bit different about these sites, we noted that these were all located in densely populated communities like Lowell, Brookline, and Fall River, with high walkability and access to public transportation services. This caused us to consider surrounding population as a potential predictor of trip generation. This indicates that separate trip generation rates per 1,000 square feet might actually be appropriate for sites located in densely populated areas. However, we might need additional data to be able to assess this, since this is really based on only 3 data points. So we mapped out the results based on population and saw that they were actually pretty flat, particularly if we removed the one outlier of the Northampton location. And if anything, it seemed like the rates seemed to indicate less vehicle trips were generated by dense urban and suburban locations, which is, again, potentially due to the availability of public transportation and the walkability factor. GPI does plan to continue collecting data on person trips versus vehicle trips to evaluate the impacts of public transit on trip generation for marijuana facilities. Rural locations like Uxbridge and Millis generated rates of 11 to 18 trips per 1,000 people, while urban locations like Brookline and Fall River were in the range of 2 to 5 trips per 1,000 people. Since the trip rates based on population varied so much, we considered what might be causing some more rural sites to generate so much traffic. We noted that some of these were located in close proximity to major highways, which caused us to examine whether the average annual daily traffic on the adjacent roadway might be a potential predictor of trips. With the exception of the Northampton site that was the first to open, and one in Lowell, where several other facilities are open in close proximity, the AADT seems to have some merit in estimating the trips generated by marijuana facilities. The range is relatively small for the weekday PM peak hour, while it's a little bit greater for the Saturday peak hour, which may be partially due to the fact that the AADT is calculated based on weekday volumes instead of Saturday volumes. So again, we wanted to see whether the number of competing facilities played a factor in impacting the trip rates based on population and AADT. So we plotted the trip rates at each facility over time. Using population over time does not really appear to indicate a downward trend, even when we're removing the outliers of Northampton and Lowell. However, the trip rates per AADT do indicate a clear downward trend, which may be an indication that the trip rates per AADT may taper off as the market becomes more saturated and might actually provide a reasonable estimation of trip generation for marijuana facilities. One thing I do want to point out is that the majority of the facilities in dense urban locations fell below the trend line, while the majority of the rural and suburban locations fell above the trend line, indicating that transit and walking may impact the trip generation rates. So GPI performed a traffic study for a site in Beverly, Massachusetts, where we had market analysis data provided by the tenant on their anticipated opening condition and long-term demand, as well as the processing rate for each register in terms of the number of minutes per transaction. The tenant estimated that they would need 3 registers to serve the demand that they anticipated, and that these registers could process patrons at 10 minutes per transaction at initial opening condition, and at 7 minutes per transaction after the first 6 months, when both the employees and the patrons became more familiar with the products and the process of ordering and purchasing the product. So we estimated the total daily trips based on an assumption that the facility would be open for 10 hours per day and have 19 daily employees, which resulted in approximately 398 daily trips under an opening condition and 458 daily trips after 6 months, once they had been able to improve their transaction times from 10 minutes down to 7 minutes. So next we compared this data to ITE as well as to empirical trip rates from the other sites. And based on point of sale and AADT, those actually gave pretty good predictors of the trips that would be estimated in comparison to the data that was provided by the tenant. When we looked at the per 1,000 square footage, the rates really were much too high. And we believe that to be based on the fact that the tenant was actually occupying an existing building that had a significant amount of space in it that wasn't needed to serve the retail sales use. So this space was being used for additional office and storage and just a lot more circulation space within the building itself. When we looked at per population, again, these numbers were much too high. And we believe this to be based on the fact that this was in a dense urban location, and that the market in this area was already fairly saturated based on it being in close proximity to several other nearby facilities that had opened in Salem and Lynn and Peabody and the surrounding area. So a condition of approval for many of these facilities is often that the applicant has to conduct a post-occupancy monitoring study to verify that the trip generation projections were actually accurate, and if they weren't, to implement additional mitigation measures if necessary. So these studies provide us with an opportunity to verify the accuracy of our projections based on these various independent variables. So GPI performed a post-occupancy monitoring study at a facility in Lowell, Massachusetts, and we compared the trips that were counted to those estimated using ITE data, as well as the empirical counts from other studies. So in general, for this site, we found that all of the methods actually overestimated the trips, but that point of sale was still the closest predictor. One of the reasons the trips have been so heavily overestimated may be that this facility also offers medical and recreational sales of marijuana, and it was a long-time established medical sales facility in the area prior to converting to recreational sales. There's also a number of other facilities in the surrounding area, which might indicate that this one is in a saturated market already. We did look at the trips that would be estimated if we were only to apply just the 7 recreational sales registers and did not include the 3 medical sales registers. And when we did that, you can see that those numbers actually come much closer to predicting the numbers that were actually generated based on the post-occupancy study. So the conclusion of our analysis is really that the number of point of sales currently provides the best correlation with the number of trips. However, using the AADT also does provide a strong correlation. And based on the strong downward trend or the consistent downward trend that we're seeing in the rates, we think that these rates will continue to drop as the market becomes more saturated, but may eventually even out, allowing AADT to be used as a strong predictor for trips for these facilities. Parking and traffic demand management measures can certainly lower the number of trips too by operating with appointment-only scheduling, having curbside pickup, and using those other types of methods to help lower the trips that can be generated. Also providing access to public transportation and walkability in the surrounding area. We do believe that really additional data is needed from a more saturated market to really assess the best predictors. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important for engineers to keep submitting their data to ITE so that we can all continue to share it and come up with the best methods for estimating traffic. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll open it up to questions.
You're live.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now live once again. Before we get into our PDH questions that we have to answer, just want to let everybody know that the link to the first session was posted and at the beginning of this session, and the link for this session will be posted at the end of this session. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was just posted. So with that, let's get to our first PDH question. What are commonly used fleet safety technologies that could also provide data to assess the building environment? The built environment, sorry. Built environment. So now not everybody be shy. We need some kind of answers from our people here. Our members. I know there's about 140 people live, so we should get some kind of responses. Anybody? Well, Noah, I'll let you answer that question, if you will.
Sure. A lot of fleets are using safety technologies. Most common would be camera systems, forward-facing cameras, backup cameras. But a lot of them are now using LiDAR, infrared sensors, thermal sensors, and all of these sensors can collect data not only on roadway safety.
Okay, I think you just cut out slightly there, but I think we got the gist of that. Second question is, how do fleets currently use these technologies to manage safety? Remember, every member, they have to be logged into your YouTube account in order to type in comments. So far, no responses. We'll give it another 5 seconds or so. Okay, Noah?
Yeah, so most fleets are using these technologies for fleet safety management, so just for daily operations. Make sure that their drivers are driving safely. Really more sophisticated fleets are using them for coaching, to coach the drivers to prevent risky behaviors and prevent collisions.
Okay.
And many insurance agencies also offer discounts, so there's that added incentive. And of course, having the data that they collect on the fleets is also useful if there's a collision, whether there's a lawsuit, any sort of settlement. It's an objective.
I think we just lost your... You there, Noah? Okay, we got you back.
Is my audio... Okay.
Yeah, it went out a little, but again, I think we got the gist of it again. So one more question from you. What other technologies are needed to turn the data collected by fleets into useful information for safety practitioners? Answers from anybody would be good. Okay, again, we'll give it another 5 seconds or so. Okay, Noah?
Yeah, so to take the raw data from the fleet safety technology, whether it's video footage or LiDAR readings or thermal readings or driver behaviors, and then to make that useful for, say, transportation planning, road assessments. There's a couple pieces that you need. One is you need to be able to transmit the data, from the vehicles or from the cloud to the offices or to wherever the data is going to be analyzed. And then you need to be able to analyze the data, and better than going through it manually. There's a host of machine learning technologies that are increasingly being used to analyze data, particularly video footage, where you can train artificial intelligence to recognize specific elements in video footage, identify those as however you like, different parts of the road, and then that can then render it useful for planning and engineering purposes.
Okay, excellent. We just have a couple of quick questions that just came up. The first is, can they record driving behaviors?
Yeah, that's the core of a lot of vehicle safety technology is recording driver behavior. So the basic set you'll see would be things like speeding, aggressive driving. Some are actually able to measure cell phone use, which is incredibly powerful data set to have, and collisions. Standard vehicles that have a quote like black box data recorder is going to capture that sort of data and preserve it, usually for a few minutes before a collision occurs. In commercial fleets, they're collecting the data all the time and can use it on an ongoing basis.
Okay, and are there any other data such as GPS location data?
Yeah, sorry, I obviously should have said that. Yes, that goes without saying that all of this data has GPS coordinates and time stamps on it, so where and when the behaviors are occurring.
Excellent. All right, the next set of questions is for Rebecca. First question is, what independent variable or variables provide the best predictor of trips generated by marijuana dispensaries? And we have 4 choices here. First choice is KSF in 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. AADT, which is the annual average daily traffic on adjacent road. POS, point of sales or registers, or D, BNC, which is the AADT and POS. See if we get any takers to this question. Okay, the Jeopardy music has about 5 more seconds to go. And Rebecca, the answer, wait. Someone says, yep, okay. They are correct. D, BNC.
That is correct.
Second question is, when did the first adult recreational marijuana dispensary open in Massachusetts? September of 2018, November of 2018, January of 2019, or March of 2019? That's funny, we're still getting answers from the first question. There might be a slight delay, that's probably why. Okay, hitting in a bunch of different answers, so I'll let Rebecca say the correct answer.
The correct answer was November of 2018.
Okay, excellent. Third question is, which of the following are likely to impact the number of trips generated by marijuana dispensaries? A, availability of public transportation. B, appointment scheduling. C, competition with other nearby facilities. Or D, all of the above. Okay, we got our first answer. And Rebecca, the answer is?
The answer is D, all of the above.
And that's what the consensus is online. Everyone's paying attention. This is great. Okay, next set of questions for Marissa. First question, how does an adaptive traffic control system work? Give it another 10 seconds or so. So while we're waiting for that, just want to let anybody know, if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to type it into the chat box while we're going through our questions here. Okay, Marissa?
So an adaptive system works either with software or hardware, and it takes detection data in the field, stop bar, advanced detection, platooning, and it sends it through its algorithms, many are proprietary, to a central location or a central server, and it uses that data to adjust the traffic signals in real time, usually cycle length, splits, offsets. So a lot of what I'm seeing in the chat is just starting to populate.
Yep. Okay, second question is, name 2 opportunities for ATCS. Okay, Marissa?
So commercial corridor is one of the most major ones everyone knows of. Special events. Some of the other ones I discussed were major roadway infrastructure that might be unique, such as the diverging diamond interchange, transit hubs, evacuation routes, all good applications. And there's plenty of others that just need to be tested to see where they fall.
Okay. And we got some responses which are consistent with what you said. And the last question is, name 3 metrics used to assess ATCs. Not used to this delay here. All right, I think you're up for your answer.
Sure. Travel time is one of the most major ones everyone wants to see. They can get somewhere quicker or more efficiently. Number of stops is something we've been looking at a lot when we're on the modeling side to see how well we're progressing people and how many intersections they can get through. Vehicle hours of delay is another good one. So again, everything I'm seeing starting to pop up in the chat.
Yep. Excellent. Well, if nobody has anything further on your side, I'll give it a couple of seconds to see if anybody has any additional questions while we're still live. In the meantime, I just want to say that in addition to thank you all for your presentations, very enlightening, informative. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We will have a break until 5:30, at which time we're going to have our welcome reception on GatherTown. Now, everybody should have gotten a link to that when they registered. If you don't have the link for whatever reason, you could go onto the Northeastern District website and you can get the link there. It promises to be very fun. We're going to have awards. I mean, not awards, different activities and so forth that I'm sure everybody's going to like. Also, during our break coming up, you definitely don't want to leave because our second hot seat interview is coming up. And I promise that they are going to get hotter and hotter and funnier. So you definitely don't want to miss it. I don't see any additional questions at the moment. So again, thank you all for presenting, and we hope to see you all at 5:30 at our welcome reception. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commercial. Mention the commercial.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today.
let's go to the next question.
Sure.
Before we do that, this one here is the Heartbeat Hot Sauce. Oh, actually, I never read this. It's from Thunder Bay, Ontario. The red habanero.
Okay.
That's got a Scoville.
Canadian Cubans.
So let's try it.
Okay, we'll try it.
Ooh. The first few are okay. It's actually when you start hitting the number 3 level service C, we're calling it, and especially number 4 and 5 are really they're gonna hit a little bit.
Okay.
So next question. Tell us about your agency. Give us some highlights about some recent projects.
Sure.
And what made them special.
So, as I mentioned, DDC is the city's premier capital construction agency. We build much of the civic infrastructure that New Yorkers use every single day. We provide communities with new and renovated structures, such as firehouses, libraries, police precincts, courthouses, senior centers, and more. DDC collaborates with other city agencies who are our clients, as well as emerging and world-renowned architects and consultants. DDC also designs and improves vital infrastructure in New York City. We deliver roadways, sewers, water main construction projects in all the 5 boroughs. We also provide sidewalks, reconstruction, water mains, sewers, pedestrian ramps, in essentially quality infrastructure that is essential for a healthy, vibrant city. In terms of a signature project, I would say right now the East Coast Resiliency Project. It is a $1.45 billion climate resiliency project that will extend flood protections and improve open spaces for more than 100,000 New Yorkers on Manhattan's Lower East Side. These are neighborhoods that were pummeled by Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and as a result of this project, will become the home to one of the most ambitious infrastructure and climate justice projects in New York City.
That's a tremendous project. I think we're all familiar with it, and we can't wait for it to be completed and be part of it.
We can all pray that there's no other hurricane before then.